Hey everyone. Oh, can people hear me? Working? Okay. Welcome to tonight's Candidates Forum, co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters, Washtenaw County, and the Ypsilanti District Library, hosted by the Ypsilanti Senior Center. My name is Shoshana, and I'm a librarian at the Ypsilanti District Library. In order to help facilitate and encourage an informed and engaged citizenry, the Ypsilanti District Library is proud to partner with the League of Women Voters this evening in putting together a candidates forum where voters can learn about the positions of both candidates before they vote in the May 7th election, for which absentee ballots shall be mailed within days.
Thank you, Shoshana. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Catherine Miro, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Washtenaw County. I welcome you to our in-person forum featuring candidates for City Council Ward 3. The candidates will be on the ballot in the special election on Tuesday, May 7th. The League of Women Voters works to expand voter rights and educate voters. We are a nonpartisan organization and are providing this forum as an opportunity for candidates to express their views related to their candidacy. Statements expressed by the candidates are neither endorsed nor opposed by the League. Also, the League does not certify any candidate responses to questions as accurate. Voters are encouraged to fact-check information shared at the forum. We bring you tonight's forum along with the Ypsilanti District Library because we believe deeply that respectful sharing of views on community issues is vital to the functioning of American democracy. Our guest moderator this evening is Taryn Willis. We're so happy to welcome her back. Taryn Reed Willis is a native of Ypsilanti, Michigan. She graduated from Huron High School and attended Eastern Michigan University, where she obtained a communications degree with a minor in English and American literature. Taryn also received her master's from Concordia University, Ann Arbor in educational leadership. Taryn has had a 20-year career in event planning, marketing, and communications, working at various nonprofit organizations and public schools. Taryn is a contractor for Ypsilanti Community Schools, managing community events, and most recently joined Washtenaw Community College as the new marketing manager. Taryn also coaches boys and girls tennis at YCS and is going into her 8th year of coaching. She also manages a household of 2 toddlers and a husband and has an adult son who works in banking. Welcome, Taryn, and thank you again for returning to join us. And she will now explain the format and get us started.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me? I feel like it is kind of low. Well, thank you, Catherine, for that introduction. It's my honor to introduce the 2 candidates. Just a few reminders, though, if you could please make sure your cell phones are on silent so there's no interruption. Also, on May 7th is the day that we would be, or you all would be voting, and there is no early in-person voting for that election, okay? All right. All right, so I'm going to introduce the 2 candidates running in the May 7th special election for City Council Ward 3. I have Desirae Simmons, who is a Democrat, and Rod Johnson, who is an independent. Thank you, candidates, for participating in this forum. The forum will follow the following process and format. Each candidate will have an opening statement of up to 90 seconds. We have our timer over there if you want to raise your hand. So she will be your focal point and making sure that you're on time. I will ask questions which came from the community. Then I will present audience questions to the candidates. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to a question unless I note a different time limit. There is one question that you will have 4 minutes to respond, okay? After the questions, each candidate may make a closing statement of up to 90 seconds. Candidates are to focus on the issues. Personal attacks are not permitted. At appropriate times, a league representative will indicate the time remaining, 30 seconds, and then stop. If you have used up your time, you will be allowed to finish your sentence. If you go over your time, you will be asked to stop in fairness to all. The candidates will begin speaking in alphabetical order by last name. Both candidates will have an opportunity to be the first or last to answer the questions. Following the questions from myself, which will last approximately 30 minutes, we will begin asking written questions from the audience. Audience members, our volunteers will be circulating in the room with note cards and pens. Please write down your questions and give the card to one of our volunteers. In order to ensure fairness, a question must be addressed to both candidates, and both candidates will have a chance to answer the question. In addition, community members watching on our live stream can type in questions for the candidates. I will read the question from live and remote audience members. If there are numerous questions on the same topic, we may combine them into one question for the candidate. Audience members are not permitted to make audio or video recordings of the forum. We will make a full recording of the forum available to public. Also, please silence your phones and electronic devices. Ready? All right. We're now ready for your opening statements. And first would be Mr. Johnson.
Hello, is this on?
Yes.
Hello, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and the Ypsilanti District Library for co-sponsoring this forum and the Ypsilanti Senior Citizen Center for hosting it. And to all of you, thank you for investing your time to getting to know the candidates. My name is Rod Johnson, and I am proud to identify as a lifelong Democrat and an Ypsilanti citizen for 4 decades residing on North Grove in the 3rd Ward. I say Democrat because although this is a partisan election, it is also a recall election, and its rules require that I assume the no party affiliation. Know that in no way does this change any of my political beliefs, or personal convictions. I'm running for office because I feel I'm the best candidate for the Ypsilanti's 3rd Ward and seek to restore trust, confidence, and professionalism in this role. I will address long-term challenges such as balancing the budget and protecting the most vulnerable among us. With a rich history of public service, I bring 16 years of experience from the Planning Commission, 11 of which I spent as a chair. This tenure made me intimately familiar with the inner workings of Ypsilanti City Council, as evidenced by the countless exchanges between the council and the Planning Commission over the years. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to serving you with all the dedication and integrity the 3rd Ward deserves.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And now, Ms. Simmons, may we have your opening statement?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Desirae Simmons. I'm your current Ypsilanti City Council member representing Ward 3. While these are not my favorite of circumstances to be in front of you, I am grateful to be able to report out on my first year on council and to get the pulse of residents on ways that I'm on track and things that they'd like to see more of. I have, through this process, been able to really appreciate the reciprocity of the residents within the ward. I have felt so held and loved by so many of y'all. And so I really appreciate that, and that's helped me get through. And I also want to say this campaign for me is really about the theme of people come first. And I realize that sometimes there's a conflict because of the realities that we currently live within and what we have to give up in order to make it so. I was elected with 75% of the vote. And yes, many people use straight ticket voting, but that doesn't mean that they don't know who or why they voted. I hosted community gatherings. I sent out 2 mailers. I met folks at their doors and out and about. My message has always been the same. There's a resident who said to me when the recall effort first began that they would never vote for me, but that there was nothing I've done that surprised them. While I would love to earn their vote for the work that I do, I will take it as a compliment that I'm doing what I said I would do and what the people elected me to do.
All right, thank you, candidates. And now to the questions. I will read the questions only once, but I am happy to repeat a question if you request. We will start with Ms. Simmons for the first question. The topic is budget deficits. The city's 2023-2024 budget calls for a $1.9 million deficit. What specific steps do you propose to avoid deficit spending in future years?
So, I think it's important to note, we recently actually had, a presentation from our, auditing company. Some things that they reported in that was that our general fund had a surplus of $3.3 million, which has increased our fund balance to $13.3 million, with an unassigned balance of $8.7 million. The city also has some committed funds, which is important to understand that the city can uncommit those funds whenever they want, which is part of how we've added to the fund balance. As an example, there was funds that were allocated for a platform for the train that was $2 million. The council unassigned that, and that goes back into the fund. So just to understand that there are different funds and buckets of money that we can think about. The unassigned fund balance is above the recommended minimum of 10% of our annual expenditures, which for us is about $1.6 million. Our monthly expenses are between, let's see here, about $1,150,000 to about $3,051,461. So a little bit of a range depending on where our staffing levels are. So I just want to name that when we're looking at our finances, that we are actually not in the red. We are above where we should be, and we can always get stronger. I think it's important that we really think about our priorities and that we put forward a plan that we work on strategically across more than 1 year. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Yes, I understand that the budget audit that was done this past year said that we had 3.7 million extra. That was for 22 and 23. This coming year, we are going to in fact be working on a deficit. And I think it's important that council members understand where we are and where we're going, so we don't end up in situations where people do things like buy buildings that we can't afford. There's a lot of things to do here, and I agree that there's a lot of funds that can be moved around and get us through a year temporarily, but in the long run, we have to do things like rebuild our downtown, make sure that the businesses are supported, make sure that we talk to the DDA of the Depot Town and the downtown DDA, and that we try to listen to the businesses and try to get as many businesses as we can and support them. Balancing the budget is pretty simple. It's hard to do, but it's pretty simple. You either spend less or bring in more income. So right now we should be really sharp about how we look at the budget and what we spend our dollars on, and making sure that although we have discretionary funds, that they're used wisely. Number two is we have to stop giving away our taxes. Too many times that we have developers come in and we end up giving them more than what they're giving us. So we need to have a strong conversation with our developers and make sure that that we're bringing in enough money to support all of the developers and the businesses and all our services, and at the same time be pretty sharp about our budget and know that we're looking at a deficit. No matter what we have this year, the deficit is still there.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. All right, continuing on with budget, we're going to talk about retiree expenses. The city's 2023 annual comprehensive financial report states that only a little over a half of the city's overall pension and post-retirement benefit costs for retired employees are funded. Can the city fulfill its commitments to retired employees without reducing services to current residents? If so, how? Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Well, these are standard finances. So down through the years that the projections, I think, I looked at it last year and this year, I believe that that the pension itself is probably pretty funded. It's right on the edge though. So something that we have to look at and plan for, but since it is basically the city that is not as in bad a shape as we think it is. Police fund is a millage, so that's not part of that. But at the same time, I believe that this is a situation where the long time planning should work out for us, but it needs to be addressed in a very diligent manner.
Thank you. Ms. Simmons?
Thank you. And I'd also ask to have 2 questions in a row to go first, since Mr. Johnson just went twice. So I guess the short answer, I don't disagree with much of what he said. Yes, again, based on what we have seen, we currently are able to meet our responsibilities, and we do not have plans of reducing services for the community at this time.
All right, thank you. All right, next question is going to be around public safety. Local media reports that downtown Ypsilanti business owners have complained recently about crime and about behaviors by homeless individuals. How can these concerns be addressed consistent with the city's commitment to community policing standards? Ms. Simmons?
Thank you. This is a really important topic because it's one of my main platform areas, which is around community safety. When thinking about a lot of things going on, I want to first say that people who are unhoused are not villains or others that we need to put in this kind of position. Some things that I think are important for my platform is thinking about being focused on solutions. So when those challenges came up this summer, I actually hosted what we called a solutionary circle to pull people together to think about how do we actually address these issues using harm reduction and kindness as our at the forefront. And out of that came some presentations to council as well as resolutions. And so we are working and leading in this area. Part of this also includes that we are currently pulling together a working group, which starts tomorrow night on unarmed community response. I'm really proud of that effort because I do believe that being able to have a non-police presence that has relationships with community members and skill sets to handle different kind of social issues and has connections with people who do not want to interact with the police will go a long way. And so we need to think about those things all of the time. And I also think that we need to think about other kinds of infrastructure that we can have to help support the community members who are here. We have to think about how we get further upstream on the issue. More and more people are becoming homeless because of our housing policies. That is it. So we need to address things up front and not only at the end.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
I've been knocking at doors and I've been downtown and knocking on also business doors. I've talked to a couple people downtown that I thought gave me some pretty good advice here, which was downtown owners are worried that we're coming into warm weather this year and they would like to see the city come up with a plan to address the situation before it happens. Because once things start to spiral out of control, then they're out of control. One of the things, and this is not something I'm saying that we should adopt as a full policy, but one of the things that business owners have told me is that they like the response times to be a little quicker if they need some help from the police, and they need a little more presence. One guy even said he thought having cameras downtown might work, which may or may not. But he thought you needed something as a presence so that people felt to be responsible for themselves and not think that it was just a free area down there. And that goes back to listening to the DDAs and the business owners and supporting them, and we should do that all the time. I'm not against having social workers be downtown and do that, but that's something in progress. We need to look at that. Ann Arbor looked at that and rejected that approach. So at the same time, we need to look at that, and if we should go there, I would say that social workers and unarmed police, unarmed citizens should work with the police in tandem and in conjunction with them and not be a separate entity downtown.
Thank you. Continuing with the public safety topic, MLive reported that last month, the Ypsilanti Police Officers Association passed a vote of no confidence in the police chief and captain. The police department continues to have serious staffing shortages despite a recently approved pay raise. What additional steps should council take to address the staffing problem, and how would you pay for them?
So I'm glad we're staying here because I do want to respond to some of those.
Wait, I'm sorry. It's Mr. Johnson's
Oh,
turn.
no, remember, I'm getting 2 in a row because he answered 2 in a row.
No,
Yes.
you're wrong. It's Mr. Johnson's turn. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson, please. Thank you.
Well,
He answered first the first question and did the introduction.
Yep, I have a format right here. Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead, Mr. Johnson, please.
okay. Police is the responsibility of the city manager. And if I were in council, I direct the city manager to have discussions with the police chief and the union separately and see if there's some common ground that they can work to. I think this is a long-term problem. Police chiefs and the police union. There's probably a solution there, but at the same time, we need to work toward that. As far as the police chief goes, I support him. I thought when the police chief came in, he said all of the right words. I think city police need to be more responsive to the citizens and understand that we're the clients. So, and we're not the perpetrators, we're the clients. So I look forward to the police chief and the union and the city manager working through this. Now, we do need more police, plain and simple. So I believe that's, I don't know if there's a separate budget process that we can carve that out, but at the same time, money has been set aside for that. I understand there's 3 more police coming on. We need them right away, and we need to support them as much as we possibly can. Again, the unarmed response segment is something that we should look at and evaluate, but I still think that we're still too far away from that, from implementing it right now.
Thank you. Ms. Simmons?
So going back to some of those different responses and then thinking about where we are when we look at what kinds of calls for service we actually get in our community. One, just to say, yes, we do need a plan. Warm weather means that the warming centers are closing. And so new housing has not just come out of nowhere. Those people still are unhoused, and we still have a lack of resource. So they will become more visible yet again. In terms of cameras, the DDA considered this in the past and the community pushed back on this. People do not want to be surveilled as they're just in public spaces, and they don't want any public funds to go into doing that. So I would not support that at all. When thinking about calls for service, so we used to actually get weekly reports from the police department. And so I was looking through that a bit just to remind myself. This is some of the evidence that shows why we need alternative responses and we need to think about our resources differently. So 1 week, let's see, there were 42 calls for service. There were, out of that, 5 that involved shooting or domestic violence or things that you might expect a police officer to need to respond to. The vast majority of those were not. Another week, there were 72 calls for service. 12 of those included things like crashes, assault, or that somebody heard shots, although it was unverified that that actually happened. It was not substantiated that there were shots. Another week, there were 50 calls. 7 were for assault, suspicious behavior, and a lot of things are around 200 West Michigan, 200 Pearl, where a lot of people are congregating. Again, if you actually have folks that have resources and connections, that's going to go longer to addressing the issue.
Thank you. All right, this question is for you, Ms. Simmons. Housing is the topic. The cost and availability of housing is a major issue within the city. What strategies do you propose to address this issue, and how would you pay for them?
Thank you. So this is another one of my major campaign platform areas. I have done work to think about and work on tenants' rights issues. And we passed a resolution to repeal the rent control preemption at the state level. I think this goes a long way. When people cannot trust from one year to the next what their housing expenses will be, it creates instability. And so we must address that and not just move people outside of the city. A lot of people might start off renting and be interested in home ownership, but we currently don't have a housing market that allows for that because we have a squeeze from multiple ends. We have the same company buying up houses and turning them into rentals, and the same company that is driving up rental prices for everyone. We have to address this as a city. We have a majority renter community. A lot of them live in Ward 3, as the growth in the city actually happened with EMU students. So this is a major issue. We also need to be thinking about different kinds of development, filling in the gaps. We need to actually do a study and gather data to better understand the rental market here, which is like what are the housing increases, what are the fees that are happening, and what kind of violations are happening over and over within that space. We also need to recognize that Governor Whitmer said that we need at least 180,000 more units of housing to match our need. And so we are actually, thankfully, finally building housing. And I think that that's important to do. And we need to make sure that we have housing stock that matches the needs of our population, which includes seniors and first-time homeowners.
Thank you. Okay, kind of going in the same direction. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, sorry.
I just read the most recent study of Washtenaw County's affordable housing, and that was from 2015. And I was surprised in it that it said that Ann Arbor was going to go up in price like it always does, but it also said that Ypsilanti's housing prices would probably tumble because we had the percentage of affordable housing was higher than normal or acceptable. What that showed me was that study is out of date, because what's happened is that the Airbnbs have come in. You've had national companies come in, you've had local people buying up the housing stock, and yes, all of that resulted in the price of housing unexpectedly going much higher than anybody had ever predicted. So that tells me one thing. I think the city needs to actually take a step back and try to understand what its housing is, try to see where it's going to go, and come up with what in the business they call it an SOP, a standard operating procedure, a way of looking at this. And so whatever housing comes up and how you look at it, we can understand what to do. Right now, we do it on a piecemeal basis. So developer comes in, gives us a plan, and then we react to it, and then it's as if it's by itself. The next developer does the same thing. So at the end of the day, what you've done is what we've done here, which is you brought in a lot of affordable housing, but at the same time, you've given away your taxes because you've not had a decent plan about that. So we need to understand all of that. down the road. We need to look at Water Street. We need to see how we can bring that up faster. And we need to talk to our state reps and the governor, because we need a lot more help for affordable housing here. This is the target of most of Washtenaw County, and that should not be. If they're all going to come here, we need a lot more help than what we have on hand right now.
Thank you. All right, now moving on. Construction complaints. Residents near the Dorsey Estate construction site state that they have complained to city officials about construction-related violations of city ordinances, such as construction vehicles blocking fire hydrants, work during prohibited times, and cutting off water without notice. The residents contend that the city has not responded to these concerns. What is the appropriate role of a city council member to address such constituent concerns? Mr. Johnson.
Well, I'd be right there myself if I were the city council person, because I get up every single morning and I look out my living room window and I can see mounds of contaminated dirt that are just there. They've been covered, but at the same time, they blow right into the neighborhood. And yes, I think the city has done a poor job of telling us, why is there contaminated dirt there? Why is it not covered? When is it going to leave? And what dangers do we have of that? The city has just not done that. As far as the construction noise and things like that, the city has gradually gotten that under control. And I know that because it's right in my neighborhood, because I can see it every day. In fact, one of my neighbors walks down there and talks to the people there and gets all sorts of information that the city has never told us. So I'd say the city has done a better job of keeping the construction timetables at the right time. But really, I think the number one thing is that there's mounds of contaminated soil that needs to be looked at. We need to be advised what are the dangers to us. And if I were the city council person, I'd be calling somebody every day about that.
Thank you. Ms. Simmons?
Thank you. So a couple of things. I do want to say that I don't think that the developments coming through have been piecemeal. They actually respond to a study that was done locally looking at Ypsilanti's particular needs. And so a lot of the developments actually have been responding to that, including the Dorsey Estates development. Folks have brought forward a lot of concerns about this development. I actually just did a live on it recently that people can check out on my Facebook page. Folks said, hey, we're concerned about construction. We need to know who we can communicate with. I took that back to the city and we were able to get a staff person to be assigned as a liaison, and that's Katie Jones. And she immediately sent a message out to community members, introduced herself, and people actually treated her pretty poorly. But that has not changed her diligence in communicating information that we could get. Because of continued concerns that came forward, I actually was able to meet, Katie pulled together a conversation with Renovare, the developer, as well as other folks who are at the site on a daily basis. And we were able to get some updates, and we talked about things like noise that came forward. They changed the time. Now they're getting there with the expectation to start work at 7:30 as opposed to 7 o'clock, which means the trucks are getting there later. That was directly in response to a concern brought forward. They also tried to respond to when people were concerned about those mounds not being covered by putting more sand on them to try to keep them covered more. So I think to say that they're not being responsive is not the case. They are responding to things that we're putting forward.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the last question before we start taking audience questions, and this is the hot topic. You will be given 4 minutes to respond because this is of the important issue due to this recall election. The reason stated in the petition to recall Ms. Simmons is her vote on the city's purchase of 599 South Mansfield for $3.7 million, noting that the property sold in October 2022 for $1.1 million. Please state your position regarding this proposed transaction. Again, you will have 4 minutes each to respond. Ms. Simmons, you are first.
Thank you. So, there's so many things with this issue. I would say that, as I was in this space, in that time, I did a few things. One, I centered the voices of those most impacted by the day-to-day, issues, such as the workers, directly. I also centered the need for our governments to accept responsibility of past harms by being active in our repair efforts and not to kick the can down the road for someone else to deal with. And I also put forward a belief that we need to invest in infrastructure that best supports the needs and wants of our residents. Based on the information that we had at the time, which, to be honest, has not quite shifted or changed, is that our current site at 14 West Forest would both be the most expensive to repair and get up to the needs, in order to be safe, and to actually provide the services that we rely on so much from one of our largest departments that is one of our most visible departments. And when things are not going right in the DPS, we know it. It's still projected to be the most expensive and to take the longest amount of time in order to repair. The 599 Mansfield site, was projected to be the least expensive and to take the shortest amount of time to be able to address the needs of our workers and of the city. The process is something that I would never want to be a part of again. The way it came forward sucked. The kinds of decisions we were asked to make and the timeline we were asked to make them with the information we had was not sufficient. The urgency that we were introduced with is really difficult. And I know better now some different things, different strategies that we can approach and use moving forward. Some of the things that I know I've learned is that I want to make sure that we have a better understanding of the need of all of our city buildings with a plan to begin saving for renovations and ongoing maintenance. I know that we need to do what we can to control the costs of repairing 14 West Forest by using resources and partnerships to do that work. And I know we need to have better processes for our staff to report unsafe conditions so we know earlier on what is happening. We are in the process right now of putting forward Band-Aids to the problem and doing short-term fixes just to get us through 2 to 5 years. So we're doing things where we're doing a study just to make sure that we can get HVAC and fire suppression in the building where people currently are. And we're gonna have to do it again. So we're gonna wind up paying twice. We are lucky that we did not have a snowy winter because things would have been worse. And so when thinking about managing the costs, there's a lot of things to consider. Are you paying for both your workers and contractors at the same time? Are you going to be paying for potential liability that can come forward because of the conditions that people have been working within?
Okay, thank you. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes, well, a recall is a very serious thing and very rarely happens. And it's an unfortunate thing. It's just part of how democracies work. Sometimes these things happen. So the point here is that we need to get to the election and get past it and move on. when this happened and I did not go to city council, but I watched it from Zoom. I was shocked at the vehemence that I saw there. I had not seen that many people upset with the council since the days of the income tax talk that we had around here. So it was, and it was pretty uniform from everybody getting up and whoever you talk to in the city. So I think what happened there was a lesson of how to make as many mistakes as you possibly can in as short a time as you can possibly do it. And that's what happened here. So yes, the city did not do its due diligence and did not keep its own buildings up. And it's unfortunate that it was the Department of Public Services, which is responsible for all of that, and they didn't do that. So, okay, that happened. Then, one of the ex-city council persons is assigned a job of going out and finding that. I thought the looks of that were terrible. You don't have a person who actually worked for the city try to buy a building and at the same time probably will get a commission from that. So that seems bad. The building itself, 3.7 million, and the year before was 1.1 million. That shows that's a lack of judgment for that. And then finally, as it all turned out, the city manager informed everybody that the city did not have the $3.7 million in cash on a deal that was going to be signed and actually was going to only have 5 days for it to go into effect. So all of these things were done wrong. And then the city finally had actually admitted that maybe, I'm not sure, that the city charter was violated in all of this. So it comes before the people. Everybody's up in arms and the city goes back and forth, pass, don't pass, pass, don't pass. So finally, the city decided to go back on its purchase and did not and backed off of that. One person did not do that, and that person is being recalled. So to me, that's a lack of trust. Well, to me, that's a break of the trust of the constituents. If you are on the wrong side of what everybody else wants, then recall is one of the things that may happen to you, or at some point, everybody's going to have to come to some kind of decision as to, are we being represented or are we not? So I think that's the whole thing behind that. I think in the end, there was a lot of wringing of wrist and just a lot of divisive things that it's nice that we've gotten further past this. But again, I say the best thing is to just have the election. Let's get on. We have a lot of issues in front of us that will that can break us down even. So we do not need bankruptcy or anything like that.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to go back to public comments and those that are on online, and it's back to 2 minutes again, okay? And we will start with Mr. Johnson. What is your philosophy for listening and considering those you disagree with?
I had that in my closing remarks and it ran over, so I had to pull that part out. And I didn't even bring it with me too, but I think that I have one trait, and everybody has always told me this, is that I listen. I think most politicians do not have that trait. They'd rather talk. I'm not going to go over here tonight because I'd rather just get my words out there and sit back and let people listen to me. But I mean, listen to them. The thing about listening is that you can pick up a lot of what people want. And oftentimes when you come into a situation where you have two different ideas going and you can listen to both of them, you may not have the actual solution, but at least that you've given a person the ability to let that steam off, say something, and then if you can at least acknowledge that you've heard them, and maybe you can give a couple of suggestions as to, yes, I support this, or no, I don't. I think that will leave a lot of tension. I think a lot of people, when I knock at doors, a lot of people say that, well, nobody ever listens to me. So I'm a listener.
Thank you. Ms. Simmons?
Yeah, so actually I have a long history of working with people that I don't always agree with. And even in my role on council, I have done that. I'm actually very direct when there's issue. I prefer to have conversation. In fact, a couple of examples, when there was concern about Clark Road development from Cheryl Farmer, who's one of the people behind this effort, I went to her house directly and talked to her about the issue and to talk about how we disagreed, why, what our positions were. Was there a way to actually come to a better solution? Um, there's some people who have been emailing council, all of us, sometimes just sending literal emojis of middle fingers, cursing us out constantly because of noise in the park. What did I do? I said, hey, what can we do to help support this? Are there ways that we can actually put forward in our calendar events the noise permit so that people know that there's going to be increased noise so they can plan ahead of time and they don't have to be surprised? So trying to find things that we can make actionable, even when it's put to me in very disrespectful manners. Dorsey Estates, again, I have looked and tried to find ways that we can respond and do what the city can do. It's not our land. So all we can do is be in partnership, and I have continued that thread. Online in messages, I have people messaging me all the time saying about this thing, what we should be doing, this thing, all of these pieces. And I'm happy to be in conversation. And sometimes it does change my point of view. It does change my approach. Someone came forward, we were looking at cannabis, and they said, oh, maybe this is a different way to see this issue. And I took heed and said, okay, let me think about that some more.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is from online. The candidates have referred to the city having a lack of resources. What are these resources and why are they inadequate? And Ms. Simmons.
Well, I think when people think about lack of resources, they tend to think about like lack of money. And I think that the city has been running as if we've been really constrained for a very long time. And so we can't necessarily do all the things we want to do all at once, which is why some of, we could do a street at a time or things of that sort. We have to be responsible in that way. Um, but there are an abundance of resources out there. And so I don't like to actually think about things from a lack. I like to think about things from what are the problems, what are the things, and how do we get to a solution? And I think that the people here help us to do that. And I think that even such things as our being landlocked, being a small physical space, which also gives us a lack of land resources, gives us an opportunity to build density and to think about how do we work in partnership with those around us, because we're literally the middle of the Ypsilanti area. The ward is hugged by the township. We are the downtown, which is why resources get populated here in this space. And so we need to better leverage that positionality in the space and in the region so that we can actually address the needs of the people who live here, the people who visit here, the people who work here, and the people who congregate here. Because we are a place of resource. We are a place of vitality and vibrancy. And so we need to put that forward in all the ways that we can.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Well, lack of resources, I'd say refers to the fact is that we used to have a Ford plant here in Exemplar, which were huge sources of income for Ypsilanti. And I was just talking to a guy the other day, and he said there was a time when the township kept crying to Ypsilanti about the city, about linking up and sharing and things like that. And Ypsilanti said, no, we're fine. Things have reversed. It's not our fault. That's just the way capitalism works sometimes. So right now, so we don't have the factors and we don't have those big financial resources coming in. So we have ourselves. We have residents really supply all of our resources for us, which means that we all have to pull together. And I look around the city and I see a lot of great neighborhoods, and I think the neighborhoods tend to pull together. They're all over the city. Ypsilanti has beautiful neighborhoods, and there's a lot of giving people here. There's a lot of friends of the Freight House, friends of the Rutherford Pool, friends of this, that, and the other. And all that means is that people understand that the quality of life here is still something that they treasure, they enjoy, and that is a great resource to have. But man, it would be nice to have some big resources like a factory or something like that here.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, this question's for you. How will you lower property taxes?
The only legal way is to simply reduce the millage, but that's not going to work because that would be bankruptcy. That's a very difficult question to actually approach, since again, we need outside income that we do not have. That's going to be so substantial that we can actually reduce the property taxes. I've been here in this community for 40 years. That's not happened over 40 years. So, and during all that time, it's because we do not have an outside source of income for us. If we could ever get Water Street up and going, that's certainly a possibility right there. But until that happens, you know, from a structural point of view, I don't see a way to do that except for bankruptcy. But
All right, thank you. Ms. Simmons?
Poof, it's done. So, I mean, I think that this is interesting question. I think really it comes to when people are talking about how am I going to control for the expenses for my household? How do I know what to expect? How do I know that I'm getting the services that I need and that we share, right? So I think one, you know, obviously increasing the number of people who live here, I think is really important. When people, even as we talk about these developments that are bringing in affordable as well as market rate housing, let's not forget a lot of these are not there. There's many different kind of populations where we're creating housing for, but that means more people in this space, which means that means more folks going to our local businesses, which means that there can be more stability in that business community, which may shift and change, right, as needs shift and change. But that also helps to build in vitality, which means that we then also think about how do we actually use our public spaces as a draw? How do we make it so people want to come to our parks and hang out for a day and then, oh, hey, hit up the different business areas that we have. We have a lot of different festivals and things like that that can bring in infusions. And I think that that's important for us to really think about other ways that we bring in money from visitors and being a destination. But really, I think that if we are able to have strong services and we're able to have a place that people want to live, then people will want to pay for those services. And I think that we need to do that and not say that we will choose one population over another at their expense.
Okay, thank you. This question is also for Ms. Simmons first. What do you believe the city should spend its millage reimbursement funds from the county's public safety and mental health millage?
Oh, this is juicy. Because I think, you know, I know this is a big topic. I know there's a lot of folks who are unsatisfied with the ways that the millage has been spent and have been looking at how the different municipalities have spent those funds. And I think that we do have a challenge here. I know just recently at a recent council meeting, public comment actually spoke to this and said that when they looked at this, they saw that part of the millage money was going to get more guns for the police officers. That's not why people were putting money into what they thought was to be mental health services. So I think that we need to be looking at those kinds of ways, of different ways of engaging with our community to address those issues. So I'd like to see our millage funds to go toward that. Which could involve things like our public spaces, like our parks. I do think that that's part of building mental health, which came up actually in a sustainability commission meeting. One of our commissioners, Brian Foley, spoke to this, the need for parks and more public spaces for people to be. So I would like to see us being able to improve those spaces, maybe get bathrooms. Also thinking about unarmed non-police response, as well as just like, again, how do we make it more vibrant? How do we find ways for our young people to feel like they're proud that this is their home and that they want to stay here and contribute here, and they're not just trying to leave as quickly as possible? I think that that's important. I would like to see us use our millage monies again to support our seniors, because it's a growing population. We have a lot of folks here who want to stay in Ypsilanti. And I think that there's things that we could do to help support that. Pedestrian, cycling, infrastructure. Again, I would like to see more money going toward that.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Could you repeat that?
Sure. What do you believe the city should spend its millage reimbursement funds from the county's public safety and mental health millage?
I would assume the question came from a concern that it wasn't being spent wisely. I think maybe we want to audit where the money went and how we spent it. So I'm not sure. That's not been on the top of my list. I don't disagree with Ms. Simmons about looking at creative ways of doing it and things like that. So to me, it's just more of first finding out what it has been spent on. Is that the correct way to do it? And then look at a lot of other issues, social issues that we can do that with, especially around mental health.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Johnson, this question is also for you. If elected, how will you address the failing Cross Street Bridge?
I believe the city did a study on bridges a while back and identified 5 bridges to be repaired or torn down and replaced. We've seen 2, the Michigan Avenue Bridge was repaired, and then we tore down and built back up the 4th Street Bridge. So first off, we're going to have to finish the 4th Street Bridge. The Cross Street Bridge has to be done, though. It is, at some point, it will be condemned, and at that point, we'll be in crisis if we're not ready for that. This is a situation that we're going to have to actually go to the state and see what the state can give us in terms of our representatives, like Irwin and Jimmy. And Gretchen says, fix the roads. Well, this is a road. So I think we should probably look into that realm. As far as funding, bridges are never cheap. So it's going to be an awful lot of money. We don't have that money just on hand, even though that we're coming out of a $3.7 million surplus. So we might have to look at a bond situation or something like that would be the best way to spread that out. But I'm sure the state will, in fact, do something for us. But at the same time, we need to start planning today for the time that we do have to replace it. It's not going to happen this year, but it's certainly in the next 2 or 3 years that's going to come up, and we have to be ready for that as much as we can. And then whatever money that we're short of, or hopefully we're not, then we could explore bonds. But first, let's just see what we can do in the meantime.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons.
Thank you. So I've actually have had some conversations with our director of public works or public services about this, especially because there were questions about the Forest Street Bridge. And so we were talking about like, okay, what does this look like? And obviously knowing that a couple of the bridges coming up are in the ward. And so one thing that I think is important is that we need to be prepared for what happens when it closes, especially as it is connected to one of our business districts. And so it's really important for us to actually have a plan ahead of time around what that looks like. How do we keep Depot Town a thriving place that people can still both go to enjoy the businesses, but also to be able to get through the city. I walk through that area all the time just to get across town. And so we'll need to think about what those things look like in terms of how people will move across the city so we aren't so bifurcated right through our central system. And so there's things that we've learned now, both through the construction that was overlapping and making it really hard to get around, as well as the Forest Street Bridge in terms of understanding how long things are taking and what we need to consider. So I think we need to take all those lessons that we learned and actually be proactive around them. And yes, we need to think about different funding. We know that this is coming up. And so there are plans around this. There have been conversations with folks at the state level. I know this is already on, one of the things that I was a little critical of, but the city has a lobbyist, y'all. And so one of my goals is to say, I want to put the lobbyist to work and say, here's the things to do. And so we've been having those conversations. It is on the mind so that as we're looking at budget appropriations and, our state folks have been pretty successful in bringing funds back here to Ypsilanti. And so I think it's through those partnerships that we can make sure that we are getting what we need.
Okay, thank you. We're going to take a question from online. With all due respect to the food co-op, why doesn't the city have a full service grocery store? And Ms. Simmons, you are to start.
Yes, love the food co-op. I'm about to be a fully vested member, y'all. That's how long I've been here. And so big fan of the co-op. And also I don't do 100% of my shopping there. It's not possible just for my family budget and different things we need, right? And so I agree with the need to have a grocery store. And that's something I've heard. And a lot of the organizing I've done over and over, people have said that we need a grocery store and an affordable grocery store here. And I believe that. Again, I think more and more people want to just be able to walk to what they need. And so we need to have a full range for people to be able to do that. And I think that we have some opportunities. People have talked about this, especially when talking about Water Street in terms of something that they'd like to see there. And I support that. And I think that those are the kind of things that are part of why we have the community benefits ordinance, so that when community members are in that space, that they can put forward what they would like to see. And access to food is so important. We saw that during the pandemic when we ran out of things, and all of a sudden everybody became bread makers all of a sudden. We had to become all these things. You had to order things online. There wasn't the kind of access that people needed. And so we need to think really carefully about how our food is produced, where it is, and how we have access to it. I would also love that when we think about different kinds of grocery stores, that we're also having spaces, expanding our farmers market and being able to have farmers directly within those grocery stores selling fresh food and produce as well. So we can be improving the access and healthfulness for all of us. And it can be done inexpensively, which we've seen through the partnerships with things like Growing Hope.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Well, it'd be great to have a supermarket here, a major grocery store, but unless the city's going to buy one, it's up to the private sector to do that. And unfortunately, Ypsilanti has never been able to turn that wheel to make those things happen. it's always been, well, all those years I was on the planning commission, we always thought about that, how we could prepare for things like that. And so, that, it's a Family Dollar that's down, the only building in Water Street. When that went in, I questioned at that point, did we need a dollar store there to be the first store in? But we did put it in, I made sure that if that store ever failed, that it would be set up so that a grocery store could just go right in. And that, when I was on the planning commission, that a lot of the things that we did were just that, being very adaptive, being prepared so that if a building did go out, we could get one in. So I've looked around the city and there are probably a few other situations like that because all businesses don't actually, survive. So I think the city should be well aware of that. As far as attracting that, again, when I first moved to this town, I think we had a Wrigley's that just closed. And I thought, well, something will open up. And here we are all these years later. I know Detroit went through the same thing and they finally got a Whole Foods there, but I think that's just a matter of if we can get more businesses to come in smaller and gradually build up, maybe we'll be attractive enough to have a supermarket.
Thank you. Okay, this next question is around Ypsilanti Community Schools and its support. What is your plan for building an ongoing sustainable working partnership with YCS? And Mr. Johnson, you're next.
YCS.
Ypsilanti Community Schools.
I think there's been a major loan out there that has been holding us back. I believe I've heard things that's finally been not paid off, but excused. We need to look into that to see if we can actually have gotten past that loan, then we can start having more resources come into the schools. One of the situations that we did not expect when we combined the two different districts was that we each had needs that the other part could not satisfy. So here we are trying to come back from that. And I praise the teachers and all of the support groups around the schools. And I think the city needs to actually be partners with the schools and do as much as we can to bring them back to the standards that they had been in the past. But I have full faith that they can do that.
Thank you. Ms. Simmons?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan. You know, I have a kid, 7 years old, first grade at Clark, or at Ford on Clark Road in the Spanish immersion program. And so big fan of thinking about YCS partnerships. One, I think that we think about our public spaces. So for instance, Wise Elementary uses Prospect Park. And I think other schools also might use our different parks or public spaces. So having those things upkept, I think, is important. I think in terms of thinking about how we share information, I think is important. Housing, housing issue impacts our schools a lot, both in terms of the fact that there's a growing percentage of YCS families who are housing unstable or unhoused. And so that creates instability within our school district. It makes it harder for students to be able to stay within the district. We need to think about different ways we think about resiliency. So the ways that the buildings are used, maybe if we're thinking about, for instance, emergency planning with climate as an example, there might be partnerships in terms of how we use these different buildings and spaces. And those could be partnerships and conversations that we should have. And then also, I think at the end of the day, it's all about how we draw people into our communities. I know when I first moved here, people were like, oh, well, I don't know if you want to buy here because the YCS schools. But when I was going around and meeting people in the neighborhood, people told me how they raised their families going through YCS schools and they were still living there, and then their children were living in the area. And so that to me is actually the strength of what that looks like. And so both the city and the schools can be working together in terms of how we draw people into our communities and help them to know that they belong here too.
Thank you. Okay, this question is for Ms. Simmons. What should the city do to correct the traffic signage at Washtenaw and Hamilton, as the new pattern is going to cause accidents?
Okay, that's very specific. Okay, so Washtenaw, I'm trying to like think, because I know I've seen this on like, yeah, and especially people, is this where the turn lane is one? You turn in this one or this way, and there's the cross. I'm not exactly sure. I do think that we do need to always think about signage and think about safety. I'm a new board member for our Washtenaw area transit study. And on my first meeting, we actually talked about crash data and looked at, for instance, the high frequency intersections where there's crash locations. We're tied for the 10th spot with Cross Street and Hamilton, actually being where there's been the most crashes with 24. We also crashes involving pedestrians. We're number 2 after Ann Arbor with this one, which is weird because for most of them, we kind of come in about 4th or 5th based on size, with 9 crashes and 2 serious injuries involving pedestrians. And this is a growing number, 9,259 crashes in 2022, which is an increase of 6.9% from 8,664 in 2021. And severe crash rate has increased 25%. And so I think that these are important things to keep in mind because there's obviously a lot of stressors on people in cars. And we need to be thinking about how our streets are designed in order for all the people who want to be in that space. And I would like to see us actually do an overall study alongside our community members who know where the worst places are, to actually design and then put a plan in place where we can tie it with the resources that we have and the needs, but also being innovative and taking what's best around the country to actually put into service here.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Well, I think the short answer here is just simple. There are definitely sign standards and light standards and things like that. I think it should be just a simple matter of taking a picture of it, writing it down and sending it to who controls these things. I don't think that's an internal Ypsilanti situation as to how that sign got. I don't think it's the signage. I think it's the lights and who can turn left and who can turn right and who can turn left. I agree. It's very confusing. One way would be to have a arrow that just points straight and then another arrow that points to the right, and so people are in different lanes. But again, this is I'm not sure who actually controls the traffic signs and lights and things like that. But I know Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti both did the same thing at the same time. So obviously there's some commission that controls all of that. It's very confusing to me going around town, looking at a lot of different things, the greens, the whites and the yellows and things like that. But I'm sure there's a basic solution to that.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to do 2 more questions and then we will be wrapping it up for final comments. Okay, there have been multiple questions about planning and future of the city. The city has no qualified planners. We hire outside planners. We need urban planners who are trusted. What are your plans for solving our future planning needs?
That's
Mr. Johnson.
basically a budget question. When I was on the planning commission, we had a staff of people. I thought the current planner, Josh, was a city employee. I'll have to look into that. I've been frustrated with the planning commission ever since the Dorsey Estates because I thought that a lot of the things that they looked at were not of the standards that I had been used to. And I fear that downtown, like in that building that's going on Washington, right behind the Centennial, there's a lot of things going on down there that the developers is pretty much asking the city to just ignore all of its ordinances and regulations, which I think will result in a very poor project. But ultimately, it's a budget situation. The city has not refill those spots as they become open. And so I think a lot of times you have people who are stressed out. I think the planning department was $200,000 over budget last year. And I think that's probably just overtime and doing a lot of different work in a lot of different areas. So if we can get, again, more equity into the city to have more money to fill these positions, I think we'll be better off. As an aside, I've known a lot of planners through the years and I've seen them come through. They're sharp. They know what they're doing and then they go work for somebody else. So most of the county staff right now are ex Ypsilanti planners. I like to have some of them come back because they still live here. So it'd be nice if they could get on the planning commission themselves.
Thank you. Ms. Simmons?
So just one thing I just want to say in response to the comment about the possible development downtown. I actually think it's important for us to consider, again, more people living downtown means a more vibrant downtown. And so I think that's something to keep in mind and to work with developers who are bringing resources, just like any other business, they're bringing resources into the city. And so I think we should actually be more open to those kinds of conversations. We're also in process of really revamping some of our departments at the city. And so we now have the community services department. And I'm really excited to see what this new structure will look like once we are able to have it fully staffed, which includes the planning department and the building department being within one, economic development being together, so we can hopefully find more connection, more ways to work together and to know what's happening in one space to the next. And so I'm looking forward to that and thinking about the different planners in that space. And the planning commission, as far as I know, have been, very active. And so I don't know that I would say that there's no qualified people in that space. I think there are a lot of dedicated people in that space. And so I'm always interested to think about how we work better and what kind of resources people need to be able to do their volunteer work most effectively and efficiently. But yes, we are rebuilding that department, and I think it's really important for us to do so. Oh, and I also just want to say we do have, I know the historic, we do have a person who's to focus on historic district too, and I think she's a planner as well.
Thank you. Okay, so we have the final question, and Ms. Simmons, you'll go first. The impact of this recall election has been rather divisive for our community of Ward 3. Friendships have been strained or broken in some cases. Once this is all over, what do each of you propose to do to bring the community back together again and have some sort of healing? Yes.
Thank you. This has been something this actually has been sitting on my mind, and I've talked about this with some residents because I've seen the divides. Because I know a lot of passionate people have been working on this and been upset to see different names on petitions, feeling they're being lied to, feeling harassed. I just was talking today with a group of renters who were talking about how many times people came to their door and how they signed out of frustration. And so it is going to be important for us to come back together. I do believe in reconciliation, and I think part of that is being able to have spaces for truth telling and to come to terms with the fullness of what this effort means. And so it's going to be hard because it is a rebuilding of trust. But one of the core things I have been focused on, I've said over and over again, is that it's important for us to have strong neighborhoods in order for the city to do what we need to do. When we have strong neighborhood connections, it makes for better communication. So when we have emergencies, like what we saw with COVID, when people felt so cut off, if we have strong neighborhood ties, we actually can send information to one place, and then the community can connect with each other. People can knock doors. They know who lives there. And so I believe that we need to have strong relationships at the neighborhood level and to better be able to connect with those at the city level to help us support our overall needs. And so I would focus on continuing to do that, to create these neighborhood communication and care hubs where we help people to rebuild those connections and to really focus on what we can do together and the places where we do agree, the ways that we care for the space that we share, and the ways that we respect each other even when we have differences.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
I had actually, I thought I addressed this earlier when we had the question, which is we need to get to the election and get through it and get past it. Because unfortunately, recalls are divisive. That they just are. You cannot get around it. I would be open to sitting down with Councilperson Simmons after this and just do a back and forth. I think all elections that have something like that afterwards. And that's like a noble way of saying, okay, now we're done with it. Let's move on. I do agree. I've always said that Ypsilanti has beautiful neighborhoods. The neighbors are strong, and the neighborhoods are what has really gotten the city through in some very tough times. So I would encourage anybody who feels that way in terms of I've lost that as a neighbor to try to in your neighborhood have some, this will be in May, so some kind of neighborhood session that all neighborhoods can do. Every neighborhood's different though, so I can't tell you how to do that because each neighborhood has a certain way and each neighborhood has certain people in that are standouts and they kind of do that. But let's do have faith in the Ypsilanti neighborhoods. I think they're beautiful neighborhoods. And I think that's pretty much the way out of this. Time will heal, but really I think if people get together, especially in the springtime, maybe we can have a spring cleanup or something like that, but something that will actually join the neighborhoods.
Thank you. All right, we've come to the end where we will now do closing statements. Just a reminder, you each have 90 seconds and we will begin with Ms. Simmons.
Thank you. So closing statements. So I have really enjoyed being one of 7 on the council body. I love working in collaboration and trying to find ways where we can all bring our strengths forward. And I've had those conversations with my colleagues about what that looks like. I am in service to the full ward and to all of Ypsilanti. On council, that is my responsibility, is to care for the fullness of our community. I am in service of learning and iterating, taking what we know and making a material difference in the lives of those who live, work, and visit here. I am dedicated to the benefit of all and not some. That sometimes means making decisions that prioritize some, but not all at once. In order to achieve equity, we need to provide some blocks to get so people can see over that fence. And of course, we want to eventually get rid of the fence entirely. I did not come into government to replicate harmful practices, but to model ways that we can make progress by doing things differently, doing things smartly, and moving away from individualized attention to collective action. And I feel that I have been successful in doing that, and I have more work to do. So I ask you to please vote for me. Thank you.
And now for your closing statement, Mr. Johnson.
Again, I thank the League of Women Voters and the Ypsilanti District Library for providing this platform and allowing me to introduce myself to you. Today, I stand before you with a single word that describes my Ypsilanti state of mind: proud. I am proud to be an Ypsilantian, proud to be a Third Ward citizen, and equally proud to call the east side of our vibrant city my home. My commitment is unwavering. I will work passionately so that every Third Ward Ypsilantian shares this sense of pride. While I mention my own neighborhood, my dedication extends to all neighborhoods of our ward and city. We are a resilient and proud community, often boasting about the duration of our Ypsilanti residency. However, let us also acknowledge that we can be quick to express our frustrations when dealing with the city council and its various municipal departments. As your representative, my job is to address your concerns and enhance your daily experiences, regardless of the life situation you find yourself in. But let us return to practical matters. Our budget demands attention. We must build equity to support our business districts, support our at-risk citizens, and uplift our great neighborhoods. Together, we can foster a unique Ypsilanti pride, one that reflects the strength and resilience of our community. If you'd like to contribute or offer your support, please reach out to me at rodforypsi.com. Your involvement matters. I would be honored to serve, and I ask for your vote. Thank you for your time, and let's work together to shape a better, more cooperative future for Ypsilanti.
Thank you, candidates, and thank you all for participating in this valuable session. Reminder that May 7th is the day to vote, and I now turn it over to Shoshana and Catherine.
Thank you so much to everyone for coming to tonight's candidates forum. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and to the Ypsilanti Senior Center for making this happen with the Ypsilanti District Library. Thank you to everyone who worked on, promoted, and engaged in this forum, including Jesse and Joy on the technical end, and Taryn Willis as our incredible moderator. Thank you to the candidates for participating, and thank you to the audience for coming to the forum. Don't forget to vote. If you want to know more events happening through the library, you can always check out our website, ypsilibrary.org. Check out our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, or of course, just come into the library in person. And we have newsletters over there called The Loop that has all the events at all the locations of this library season.
Thank you, Shoshana. Yes, a huge thank you to Taryn for moderating again tonight. Yeah, and to Joy and Jesse, and also to the candidates. Thank you for giving the public an opportunity to hear what you have to say, and to everybody for coming tonight. All of our candidate forums are available for streaming on your computer or smartphone. Go to our website, lwvwashtenaw.org and ypsilibrary.org, and look for the links to these programs. This recording will be up on our YouTube channel. You can find it through our website in a few days. Jesse will work hard to get that up for people. And please urge your friends and fellow residents to watch these forums and share the links with them. And please note that the League is also co-sponsoring an in-person forum for the Democratic primary for sheriff. It will be held on Wednesday, May 8th at 6 p.m. at the Learning Resource Center here on Washtenaw Avenue. And for additional nonpartisan information on candidates and ballot issues, go to vote411.org. Thank you, candidates, for uploading your information. Here, find out what candidates say in their own words. And as a reminder, all voters are eligible to cast an absentee ballot, and Michigan law provides for election day registration. Whether by absentee ballot or in person, if you live in Ward 3, please vote in the May 7th election. Thank you and have a good evening.